Welcome to the first of 2 October meetups for the Triangle DevOps group. First of all, it's nice to be inside of Lifomic this time. The hallway was wonderful, but I mean, the acoustics are incredible. Yeah, so I've had a lot of apologetic emails, messages. It's great to be back inside. Thank you so much for hosting.
Sorry, guys.
Cool. So, as I was saying, we're going through a couple announcements real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Ann. Did talk to her. You guys are welcome to yell out your questions to her as, or interrupt her as much as possible, I think she said. So enjoy that. And then additionally, she wants your feedback. So afterwards, please be sure to, during the networking and QA, tell her what you thought of the talk. Think she can do better, worse, whatever. So the next meetup is going to be October 17th at Lulu, which is in Morrisville. It's the all-day DevOps viewing party. Starts at 8 till 5, only because their head of engineering didn't want to work after that. But the idea is, I think it's like 24 hours of talks. It's global. I think they have like 15,000 people signed up. They sent me free stuff, so I'm obligated to talk about it. But yeah, the turnout looks pretty good. I think we have like 45 people signed up. So if you want, it's drop in, drop out. Food's provided by Sonotype. There's swag there, like the whole deal. So that one should be really good. Additionally, also in October of 2019, DevOps Days Raleigh, starting really early. I think we're October 1st and 2nd. Yes, October 1st and 2nd. Tickets are already available on Eventbrite. Early bird pricing, which is going to be the same as early bird pricing. But that's already out there. What else? I believe that's it in terms of like conference, things like that. Yeah, all things open in 2 weeks. I think the 20% off still works that was handed out. Try DevOps 20, I think is the code. Brings tickets down to what, $199, I think, something like that. The speakers look great. I've already created tracks for my employees. Like, it looks like it's going to be really good. So, all right. So, any first timers? Seem like a lot of them. It's been a while. Yeah, but perfect. Guys keep coming back. Yeah, and this we're going to run to the end of the year. I'm setting up. Working through November right now. We'll be doing lightning talks in November. There'll be scheduled lightning talks, like 2 or 3 that are just like, okay, these guys have already approached, but then I'll be open for. So if you want to come up, do a lightning talk. If you guys are interested, just prepare and then raise your hand when it happens. Or send me an email. It's chris@triangledevOps.com. Let me know you want to talk for lightning talks with just a subject. So I think Matt's going to talk.
Yeah, like to.
About facilities management.
Delegation of responsibility.
Yeah, there's that. Anyone hiring? Excellent. Stand up, talk about yourself, your hiring.
Expression analysis, which is part of what used to be Quintiles, but is now IQVIA. Horrible name change, but it's a genomics lab here, a company that was acquired by Quintiles. We're hiring for Linux HPC admins and managers. I posted a link on the meetup discussion website, so click that and apply, and send me an email if you do, and I'll take a look at it directly.
Your name? Oh, you're on the post.
Yeah, Daniel Sterling. And
Yes.
yeah, the latest we're hiring on the discussion.
I'm Russell Harrison. I'm from Patient Pay. We're a startup who's getting a lot of opportunities, so now we need to grow quickly. We're hiring Java developers, Angular, DevOps, absolutely. We're actually having a meetup next week, the 18th. Got links to it here, that live here, that we need to come talk to us, even if you're not looking for a job, just come network. So, or talk to me tonight.
In the back.
My name's David. I'm at IBM, and we're hiring full stack engineers for a fantastic team that's been transforming IBM by bringing tools like Slack and GitHub and changing culture in radical ways, focusing on chat ops, looking at how to help teams manage incidents better, and we great culture of trust and transparency, and see me after if you're interested.
Anyone else?
Yeah, here. So David has like the coolest team at IBM. But if you're not going to go to IBM, you can go like, you can definitely help us manage meetups, keep doors unlocked. We're looking for just really anyone excited about software development, everything. Server side, client side, DevOps. If you're good, we want you. So, yeah. Go to Hayes too.
Yeah.
They're helping us.
We're doing the hiring announcements.
Yes.
Cool. All right. My name is Jim Kane. I work for McKesson Technology at the the Clinical Decision Support Unit in downtown Durham, and we're hiring a couple people for mid-level and then also senior level tech lead types. This all includes DevOps, back-end, front-end, Ruby on Rails, Ember. So please send me after if you're interested. Thank you.
Awesome. Anyone looking? Oh,
Yeah, so I just remember my team's actually hiring someone. So it's unusual. Hi, I'm Jason Hibbets. I'm with opensource.com over at Red Hat. And we're actually hiring someone, a community manager for opensource.com. It's kind of, we're looking for someone who's kind of maybe a coder or a developer that doesn't want to do that anymore. That's good with writing and good with just kind of curating posts about technology. So I'll post it in the meetup.
awesome.
Hey, how are you?
Anyone else? Really? Okay. Anyone looking? Yes. Stand up. Tell us about yourself.
Chuck Jager, developer background, interested in data analysis and development, primarily in the healthcare field.
Come work for me.
Myself, I'm Brian, lived here 8 years ago before moving to Indiana, then coming back. Developer, data analytics, AWS infrastructure, and just kind of casually looking at this point.
All right, cool. And then Hayes, our food and drink provider, she gets the floor. So
Okay, so I don't have like a big announcement because Megan Lloyd usually does this and she's not here tonight, but I have a couple of jobs. We always have DevOps openings. We've been sponsoring the Triangle DevOps for quite a while now, and so a lot of familiar faces, but a lot of new faces too. So if you guys want to like take one of these, pass it around. It has Megan's information on it. It has a couple of our openings on here that are directly related to DevOps, and you can reach out to Megan if you're interested in any of these opportunities. Sound good? All right, awesome.
any other announcements? Anyone? All right.
I should probably mention our meetups at Bond Brothers. If you like beer, please go beer.
Excellent. Additionally, $1 million app idea. Get a bunch of people in the room who's looking, who's hiring. So you put in the app, and then it's brilliant. Like a dating app, like a Tinder. Or like real life. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Anne. And again, like as she said, feel free to ask whatever questions you'd like. And the Q&A session afterward, please come and give her your feedback.
Thank you.
All right, still telling me I can't share. Yes. Put us confused about sharing. All right.
Just pushing it against
All right, well, keep eating. I don't mind chewing. I'm a mom, so I'm used to everything's got food and crumbs all over it. So it's good. Thanks for coming out. I know it's tough with this impending storm and everybody's going to be home tomorrow. I'm working from home and school's canceled, and I don't know why. I'm not super excited about it, but I'm going to be on site at a client. So my kids can fend for themselves. I would love your feedback on this. So my name's Ann, and I've been working in IT for a really long time. I started writing code almost 30 years ago, hardcore coder, and then I got into data modeling and analytics, and then I have a knack for speaking business, which I started working on that side, business solutioning, then eventually started running large-scale programs and then shared services. So I've kind of crossed the gamut in IT, and I'm more excited about DevOps finally catching on than anything else in a long time. So I really do need your feedback on this. I'm scheduled to give this talk at a couple conferences coming up this fall. So the chance to be with a group this large, but in this intimate setting, you mean feel free to edit me on the fly and offer correction, because part of this is representing this community at a stage, in a national stage, that RDU is a hotbed for DevOps, and this is where we're driving. We're a really viable alternative to Silicon Valley with a great quality of life and an amazing, emerging, cohesive tech community. So I'm excited to have a chance to speak and talk with you guys about this. DevOps starts with knowing your numbers. Came from one of my friends is runs the local Go Red for Women event. Have you guys heard what Go Red for Women is? So it's heart disease is the #1 killer of women. And so Macy's and the American Heart Association have gotten together and formed this event annually, and it's syndicated through most major cities, called Go Red for Women. And it's targeted at raising awareness for your risk factors for heart disease. And while I was sitting there at the Go Red for Women event this year, and they're talking about the whole Go Red for Women and Know Your Numbers model, it just kind of came to me that this is a really elegant model that can help accelerate the adoption of DevOps if we really look at the model in terms of why DevOps matters. I mean, DevOps is a term that was coined in 2009, and it has not caught on fast enough because it's so focused on IT and how IT works, and not enough on why it matters. Just so what? And I see Doug Newman and he's already given me grief before about beating my drum. I just want to let you know you're going to see those 4 drums up there. Beating my drum. We got to really talk about why DevOps matters, which means we have to think about why DevOps matters, not just because it's cool. We've got to get really cohesive with our tool chains and our business value realization. So let me go back. This is my trigger because I haven't looked at this in a few weeks. I'm sorry about that. So I got to pull out my notes to remind me what I was supposed to say on each of these. Oh, I said it already. That was the slide where I was supposed to tell you about my friend being the chair of Go Red for Women. So this model comes from the American Heart Association. And every talk I've ever done, I found it really useful to go and grab a definition. So I go to Wikipedia to get a definition of DevOps, and this is terrible. I mean, I can't even read it. I'm not even going to look at it. So I'm going to offer you guys a different definition of DevOps. I have this brilliant friend. He's awesome. And it was probably 2012 when we were out to lunch one day talking about DevOps. He's like, "And everyone's thinking it. This is simple. It is the collapse, the consolidation, and automation of the software delivery supply chain." This is no different from what happened in the 80s and 90s with reinventing the factory. I mean, when Eli Goldratt wrote the goal, what we did was really take the supply chain in product development and compress it and automate it and optimize it. And that's what's happening right now in software. So that's what DevOps is. In fact, how many of you have read the Phoenix Project? Probably everyone, right? And we all know the Phoenix Project was based on, Gene Kim was trying to recreate the goal in software terms. So when we talk about DevOps, I really want to think of it as the collapse and automation of the software delivery supply chain. Are you guys comfortable with that definition?
Collapse sounds kind of negative.
I do like consolidation.
Consolidation better than collapse? Consolidation it is. It's the consolidation and automation of the software delivery supply chain. It's, you know, words make a difference. I mean, you know, it can have negative
That's
or.
great for the dev side of the audience, but if you have ops people, not so much.
Yeah. Fire.
Right.
Okay, let me think about that. That's a great observation.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it is more than that.
Yeah, I do like claps better.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, what you're gonna find in the whole know your numbers talk actually leans heavier ops than it does dev. So, all right, I gotta work on that. Well, when we leave today, I wanna, everybody should walk away with 3 things. Again, this model is taken right from the American Heart Association. I'm just adjusting it for you guys, but I want everyone to walk away knowing their DevOps risk factors. And then I want you all to be able to answer 5 key questions. For the American Heart Association, it's no 5 key numbers, but for our purposes, it's going to answer 5 key questions. And then 7 simple steps you can take to make it more clear, to know your numbers, to actually be able to drive value from DevOps by knowing your numbers. So, starting with knowing your risk factors. I love this model because American Heart Association makes it so clear. There are risks you can do something about, and there are some you can do nothing about. My sister, she called me when I was on my way in here because she's pitching something new at work, and what they did would plant her in my short-term memory. So now you guys all get to know her most embarrassing moment. We were on our way home from school. We went to Catholic grade school, and she was in 5th grade, and I was in 4th grade. And we're walking home, and she's crying the whole way home. She won't say anything, but she's crying, and she's very dramatic. And so I finally said to her, I'm like, you got to tell me, why are you crying? She's like, because I'm going to have to be a nun.
Oh.
I'm like, what? I'm going to have to be a nun. They came in and talked to us today about vocations, and none of the other girls are willing to be a nun, so I'm going to have to be the nun. I said, no, you don't. Right? It's a risk factor. You go to Catholic school, you get the risk factor. She assumed that because nobody else wanted to be the nun, she was going to have to be the nun. What does this have to do with DevOps? Nothing. It's really just a funny story. But we've got risk factors. There are some we can control and some we can't control. And the American Heart Association did a great job saying, you know, you can't control the color of your skin, the texture of your hair, your parents' ethnic heritage. You cannot control your heredity, but you can control some of the choices you make. Right? You can control whether you smoke, whether you eat excessively. You know, there are things you can control. So be aware of them. They're not right or wrong. They're just be aware. So how does that translate into DevOps? Well, we need to be really intentional about the things we can control and we can't control. You know, I came up with 4 things that we can and should control. And the first one, we can and should control how we communicate with other teams. And too often, we punt that. We punt that communication. We ask the boss to talk to another team, or we hide behind emails or, you know, instant message or message. You can change, you can control how you interact with another team. You can control whether you develop empathy and understand. If you're on the dev side of the house, what's the experience of an ops person? Take an ops person to lunch and hear his story, right? Get to know what his day is like and take that into consideration and maybe build that type of friendship so that he hears your story too. So you can control how you communicate. You can also control your standards. I was working with a client and found out they had great development standards and then watched every single developer bypass them. Right? They all, and then when we tried, somebody left the team and they tried to move work over to another guy, but he had all of his own custom installs and tools, and it wasn't easy to pick up his work. If you want a successful DevOps environment, you need to control the standards you use and the processes you enforce. Right? Choose the processes that are worth enforcing and don't enforce processes that are stupid, right? Over the top process for process sake. I am gonna slightly tangent here. I recently had a really heated debate with some solution architects about a process they didn't want to adhere to. And it's not that there's I have a blog out there called Nuance Doesn't Roll Up. And this really applies in the DevOps and applied with this argument. It's these teams were saying we can't follow this process, we're different, we're special, we're nuanced. You lose what makes us special when you force us to use these numbers. What I would say with that is some numbers need to roll up. So when you are choosing the processes that you enforce, you have to know that DevOps isn't just Dev and Ops. You're part of a larger ecosystem. And so the work you're doing needs to roll up to an organization, usually that's getting you funding and selling what you do. So that you can choose the processes you enforce, but they have to go beyond just supporting Dev and Ops. They have to support the funding cycle. They have to support the prioritization process. You can also control the tools that you use. And you never have to be the victim of getting a tool forced upon you. Like, this is the tool we use. If you don't like the tool, research competition, explain the limitations of it. If you don't, there's got to be reasons you don't like it. Maybe it doesn't integrate, or maybe it is error prone, or maybe it doesn't give useful readouts. Just be clear about why it isn't working for you. You can control that, but there's a whole host of things you can't control. And what's funny is sometimes we get all hung up on what we can't control. And we miss all of these simple things. We miss the fact that we could go out to lunch with the ops guy and hear a story. We miss the fact that if we don't like the tool we're using, we should research other and prepare other alternatives. And we miss the fact that if there's a process that's wasteful, we have the chance to change it. But you can't control what your competitors are doing, you guys. You can't. You can't control what's happening in the regulatory environment. You can't control changing user preferences. You can monitor them, but you can't control them. And if you compare this to knowing your numbers, this becomes a great, simple framework. There are questions you can ask. You can go back to your desk tomorrow and you can say, am I controlling these? Am I being deliberate and intentional in how I communicate with other teams? Have I given my input onto standards that are relevant and those that have become irrelevant? Am I enforcing processes? And so I'm going to admit right now in front of all of you that I have a PMP. It lapsed 2 years ago, but I want to say just by the sheer fact that I have a PMP, I have enforced processes that were stupid and wasteful. And you never have that wake-up moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was insistent that you followed this mistake, my bad. PMP's lapsed, gone. But know that you have to have those moments, those aha moments when you realize you've been fighting for the wrong thing. So don't get hung up on these. Do get hung up on those. Does that make sense? All right, cool. My kids told me I'm not allowed to say Coolio anymore, that it's not a date. I'm like, what? You think people aren't going to realize I'm 50?
You were allowed to say Coolio at one point?
All the time in the early 90s. All right, you were. That's funny. Okay, 5 questions you have to answer. So anybody know these numbers? So let me tell you a story about Know Your Numbers. In 2005, I was working for an insurance company, and they had this campaign called Know Your Numbers. And we all went downstairs to, there was a tunnel connecting all of the businesses. And we sat at a table and we had our blood drawn, and they read this thing out and told us their numbers. And I'm like, oh, this is really kind of interesting. And I went back the next year and did our numbers, and this number was really high. It was 121. And they're like, oh, that's a fluke. That's not a problem. I'd had a giant baby there that year, and they're like, oh, it's just because you had a baby. And I went back the next year, and that number was 123. And then I went back the next year, and it was still over 120, and you guys know what that meant. Diabetes, right? And I had type 2 diabetic, just from knowing my numbers. But because I learned that, right, I stopped eating animal product, right? And now I don't have diabetes. So know your numbers has played a really important part in my life. Because I took these took my annual benchmark, whatever numbers, compared them against I compared against the benchmark. I took my baseline, compared against the benchmark, saw this was fine, that wasn't fine. I made lifestyle changes. I'm not diabetic. It's not a problem. I just am not fun at lunch. Because I don't eat cheese, right? And I don't eat meat. But that's okay, because I know my numbers. This is such a cool model to lift and drop over to IT, because we get so hung up on how we do things. When I was a developer, I would love, when I solved a particularly complex problem, I'd get very, very invested in my solution. I'd fall in love with it. It didn't always matter to the business. It didn't always matter. So what I want to talk about is the 5 questions you have to answer. How many of you know the importance of the assets you support, especially if you're in operations? Do you know which assets drive the most revenue to the business? Do you know where they sit on the importance of disaster recovery? Do you know whether the data are systems of record or unique or special? Do you know what the highest priority project is? Or is it all of them?
All of them.
Right? Or does it change every day? When you are working on DevOps, the number one most important number you need to know is, how important is what I'm working on? Before I go fight for something, I need to know if it's something that is is really critical to the business, and what separates the business from its competitors. You have to know that. If you don't know that, then you're not fully doing your job. You're like me as a PMP, fighting for things that are noise. So the next thing I had, what assets are most important? Which projects are the highest importance? Here's my drum, Doug. There's only 4 reasons you ever do a project. And when you guys are working on a project, I challenge you to know which one or more of these 4 your project stands for. The first thing is, we do projects to grow the business. That's it, right? Are they bringing in more clients? Are they bringing in more money? Are they increasing market penetration? Are these projects going to grow the business? And what is my role in that project? You've got to know that. The second reason we do projects is to protect or enhance the brand. Sometimes we just do things because this is a digital age. Do you guys know what the nickname for 2017 is? The year of the retail apocalypse. We had, right, dozens of retail establishments that have been in business forever that we never think we'd see founder closed. Last year was the retail apocalypse, because these companies weren't paying attention to growing the business and protecting the brand. When we're talking about DevOps, and when we're talking about accelerating the delivery of technology to the market, we have to be doing it to grow the business, protecting or enhance the brand. There's 2 other reasons we do projects. I say ensure compliance, but I'm changing that one to reduce risk, right? Compliance is an element of risk. We do projects to reduce risk, and we also do projects to reduce cost. Do you guys are working on projects right now know what your projects are doing? Do you know, anybody know if you've got that this is important. If you don't know, ask. Is this project going to help grow the business? Is this project going to help protect or enhance the brand? Is this going to reduce our risk? Is it going to lower cost? Know what it is. I'm telling you the two on the left are much more important than the two on the right. Top line growth trumps bottom line growth, but they're the only four that matter. And no, lots of times they do two at a time. Because you can reduce cost and protect the brand at the same time. You could do all four of them at the same time. But if you're going to do them, you have to know how are you going to measure that you've actually gotten that done. This is the reason this is important. Oh, I wanted to do the next one. All right, we'll do this one. Question number 3 that you have to be able to answer is, do I have the right people on the right projects at the right time? Am I the right person to be working on this project at the right time? It amazes me that you can have your top engineers working on your number 4 project and your interns or a contracting firm working on your number 1 project. Have you guys ever seen that?
Yes.
Right, and if you're an employee, it stinks when you want to be working on the cool thing, but the contractor's getting the cool thing. It doesn't feel good, it's not fun. You want your employees working on the cool things. You know, that matters. When I first started working on a PMO, I had 100 people, and I didn't know who was working on what. So I kind of got this 2-dimensional list of, you know, what people were working on, how many years, whether they liked it, what did they want to do. And then put next to it what projects were they working on, and found this huge mismatch. It was so simple, you guys. It was so simple. Some of my most experienced project managers were working on $250,000, $350,000 projects, and I had newbies tackling $2 million projects. We swapped them. Simple swaps, and just created 3 groups of projects, 3 groups of project managers, and you had to learn. You had to get sponsorship and to practice and get good in your field before you could move up. And guess what? The success rate of our projects went. It went from being 15% to being 85%. Wow. It was so simple. Yeah.
So I was just curious thinking about that, assuming that a lot of the managers allocated human resources that way, knew the importance of each of the projects, how did it seem like you got swapped in the first place?
That's a great question. They didn't, nobody asked. It was they were using FIFO, first in, first out. So as a project came up, can we do it? Yeah, I've got an available body. And so it was one of those things rather than that misconception that if we stop and take the time to do the assessment, we won't keep moving forward, so let's just use what we've got. It's the same thing in DevOps. If we take the time to do test-driven development, or if we take the time to build the automation up front, we're going to slow the process down, but we're not.
Can't change the wheel, too busy.
We're too, exactly. So that's how it happened. This is really important. And it's something I encourage all of you to do and challenge you guys to do is if you feel that you're overqualified for the project you're working on, talk to your boss about it, right? Create some opportunity to work on the right thing. The next thing, this is a classic, really just a whole, I've seen multiple, in fact, I'm helping a team with this right now. Right, they're working on automating something that is not the long pole in the tent. It's a good example. You know, if you can push code to production, push code to a test environment like 20 times a day, but if you're not moving from test to prod, that's not a good. Let me give you my picture. This is a 1978 Barry Bain picture. And those of you who are familiar know why DevOps matters is because the big push to automate testing really doesn't matter. Because if this axis is your resources and this axis is time, then by the time you get to that heinous testing phase, you've already expended the majority of your resources. So what you want to do is push your improvements here left. So when I say automate the long pole in the tent, don't bother focusing on efficiency of things that aren't slowing you down. It's the theory of constraints. It's exactly what Eli Goldratt talked about. It's just what Gene Kim talked about in the Phoenix Project. When the number you need to know is what process is slowing you down. Is it commits? Is it builds? Is it static tests? Is it merging? Where are you getting gummed up in the process? That's the process. In DevOps, we do value stream mapping, but I am watching people skip right over that step because they're so good and they're so into integrating the tool and we've got this. They're skipping over value stream mapping. Do not, because we have to know where this constraint is. And the fifth question is, what piece of technical debt is costing you the most? I added this as so. Are you guys all familiar really with what tech debt is? It's when you're using, let's say your organization has a reference architecture, and these are the go-forward technologies that we're choosing to use, we're choosing to invest in, and we're making sure that they integrate and work nicely together. What's sitting outside of that? That's tech debt. When you're using technologies that are not go forward, that's tech debt. When you're using multiple versions of the same product, that's tech debt. When you're using intentionally building bugs into the system and we're coming back to them later, that's tech debt. Some of it's okay, right? Some of it's okay. You know what? I got like a 0.5% interest or something on a car loan, and yeah, that's okay. That's debt, but it's like free money. But when somebody unsolicited gave me a call yesterday and let me know that I was eligible for a business loan at an annual percentage rate of 22.5%, right? That's debt. That's debt that costs a lot, right? It's compounding day over day. But it happens in technology too, and sometimes when we're really caught up in our delivery and our processes, we forget to make sure that the work that we're focusing on, we forget to make sure that we're part of the reference architecture and the go-forward technology, and we're not clinging to things that become debt. That's hard. That is me clinging to, my PMP, right? And some of that's just flat out debt. That's waste. Does it make sense? I made this picture for TriTog, the Triangle Test Automation Group, because this is, I didn't remove it for this talk because it still makes me laugh, because the RAF is the reference architecture for test, because that was for TriTog. But if you think about it, and I'm appealing to you guys as dev and ops specialists, don't force the test team to use the tools you want them to. Let them define their own test architecture, their own test automation architecture, right? You're smart, you're capable, engage with them. Don't throw your tools at them. Their tools matter too, because when you foist your tools on them and say you've got to use this because it works for us, you've actually created tech debt for the quality team.
There shouldn't be a test team.
Okay. I love that question. So there shouldn't be a test team. And I can tell you, actually, I'm working with one of the premier DevOps firms in the country right now who went 2 years into there shouldn't be a test team, but they are integrating into a legacy regulated environment, and they didn't have an end-to-end quality plan, and they did not have relationships with legacy systems. So until all the legacy systems are gone, there might need to be one.
Right, the testing team should be coaching the development teams on doing testing. The testing team, I think you're referring to, is the tail of it. Like, let's go do a testing.
See, in my happy place, the testing team is coaching the development team on how to do testing and defining the setup. But in the reality of larger organizations, there's both. So those are the quality engineers that are advising on how to do end-to-end and build it in. And then when you're snapping into a larger, but yes, you're right. So that's a good point. I'm not going to bring that one to the DevOps Summit. That was really good real-time feedback. Thank you. All right, but the picture still makes me laugh. I like pictures. All right, so what can you do? 7 simple steps. So the American Heart Association gives us great 7 simple steps, which these aren't that simple, right? Because not eating animal product, I can tell you, is not simple. It's inconvenient. It drives my family crazy. When we go stop somewhere to eat, the question is, can Ann eat there? And the kids are used to it, but I've been doing this for 12 years. Yeah, my husband's still not used to it. Drives me crazy. But so manage your blood pressure, your cholesterol, be active, your blood sugar, eat better, stop smoking. Those are the 7 simple steps, the American Heart Association. So we need 7 simple steps for DevOps engineers. So I offer this thing, I call it fact-based operations. And we're going to talk about it, and then you'll see where the 7 simple steps come from. But when you are running an organization, particularly if you're running an operations organization, you really need to continually look at your external factors against your internal factors and your people against your process. So how do you know your DevOps efforts are working? Well, you can first tell because of your production results, your customer satisfaction, your performance, your uptime, your availability. The next thing you can tell is your projects, your product. These are projects. You can call them product enhancements, but are you getting better at delivery? Are you getting more features out there faster? Are they getting adopted? Are you actually having fewer post-release incidents? Or what do your trends look like over time? And all of this sits on your internal processes. Your workforce. Do you have the right people on the right projects in the right place at the right time? The first time I did a workforce analysis, so I did the PMO thing, then I moved and started running a quality team. And I had, and they were the classic engineer. I had BAs and testers. So at the beginning and the end, and the first thing I did was swap. I'm like, you've got it. If you're going to work at the beginning, you have to work at the end. If you're going to work at the end, you have to work at the beginning, because the truth is you should be working throughout. That's another, but what we did is take a look at who we had. And we had these legacy systems were actually the core of the business, and 95% of the people supporting them were eligible for retirement within 5 years. Oh, that's a problem. But these are risk factors you have to look at things. And one of my my kind of lead architect that I work with is forever flummoxed at what do managers do. She's like, I don't get it. I don't get what leadership does. You go talk to them. And I'm like, well, Laura, they look at risks. They're just looking at different risks. They're not technical risks. And that's her favorite one. She's like, okay, I get it. I get it. That's a business risk. But the other thing you have to look at is your internal capabilities. What are your tools, techniques, and methods? Have any of you worked for organizations that refuse or to adopt DevOps or put it on the back burner? Right? And you're like, why are we intentionally driving the car into the ditch? So as a leader, you got to be looking at, are we bringing in, are we investing in the right techniques and methods so that we're not only delivering a better product, we're getting more predictability with our projects, and we can actually attract and retain the best people in the market. So that's what the FBO framework is, and that's where the 7 questions came from. So the 7 questions you have to start with, I call them DevObstacles. but 7 steps you need to take to reduce your dev obstacles. The first step is to get your production environment under control. However, you need to do that. You need to make sure that your most important assets are the most available. You need to make sure that the response times are what you need it to be. So step number 1 is getting your production environment under control. Step number 2 is let's streamline your project priority list. They're all not number 1. Mathematically, that's impossible.
1A, 1B.
Right?
All priority 9.
Exactly. This is essential. And I think because you guys deal with facts and data, this is a really good point. Which number 1 do you want me to work on today? Or look at all of these number 1s. And now that you know, you can arm them with the question, well, I've got these 3 projects, but these 2 are reducing cost and this one's about growing the business. Is this actually the number 1? So have that conversation. The next thing is making sure you've got the right people on the right projects at the right time. If you have something that's really critical, don't use a FIFO method for staffing, right? First in, first out doesn't mean you get the right person. It means you got who's available now. It may or may not be the right person. If you have really critical initiatives or you're trying to promote some DevOps practices, get qualified people working on them in the right order. The next thing is constantly invest in your methods and tools, your evolution, and cross-sharing and collaboration. Whether you're doing launch and learns, don't let your tools and data get stale. Don't go accumulating a bunch of debt that you're not paying attention to. You've got to pay attention to it. That leads to the next thing, manage it. If you've got tech debt, start to systematically get rid of it. You can sometimes, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I'm going to go back to when I graduated from college and I used credit cards to fund my startup costs. Then I had to take an out-of-town assignment because in the early days, like 30 years ago, when you're with Accenture, you get per diems when you're out of town, so I had to take an out-of-town assignment because I had to start using these per diems to pay off my debt, and I had to stop, accumulating. It happens. If you've accumulated tech debt, get rid of it. It's holding you back. And the thing is, you guys, it holds back your DevOps investments because you lose credibility and also uses the same resources that you need to invest in the future.
I'm wondering, this is a great slide. I'm wondering, tech debt it seems pretty nebulous to me. I agree it's important. I'm wondering if it's sort of if tech debt is part of all of these things. Does that make sense at all?
It does make sense, right? Because you're saying there's debt in putting the wrong projects first, and you're saying there's debt in not staffing your most important, and so maybe I can put something more powerful there, a better step. I think you're right. I think there's inherent debt if you're using outdated methods, like showing your PMP before walking into that's an outdated method. It was really good in 92 though.
There was at least a talk a couple of years back that tech debt may not get the impact you want with management. They're referring to it as a technical naked call option. Let's them understand that there was maybe a small benefit, but we don't know how bad it's going to be when it finally goes wrong.
So tech debt is a nebulous risk.
For your average business, that is a normal thing to keep the operations running versus a naked call option, short. You could be on the hook for a lot more than you ever got back from it.
That's a really, right? So they might think of debt as an investment, short-term investment to get something going, whereas we're thinking this is just dead weight.
Right.
At this point, you should also point out that you should make the tech debt visible. Making it visible is critical.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Because if you don't see, I think we've got to maybe articulate the tech debt as a risk that needs to get managed. It's just exposure, and I think if we make it visible.
I've articulated it in these are points of crop that could explode in our face. Just sit there and say, and that let me prioritize, hey, this is the highest risk system. And it doesn't necessarily have to be equal as far as what the development would be, but the individual points that can go wrong on it give you a baseline metric to say, hey, these are the systems most at risk. This is the process most at risk.
And making it visible.
How do you make it visible? Can someone speak to?
Short story illustration. Medical manufacturer with facilities in Mexico was running Windows 95 and Access for their database on the line. That died in 2010, and they had to find a hard drive with Windows 95 on it to replace it.
So that's visible after
It's visible when it
failed.
dies.
Right, yeah. How do you make it visible? Start pulling cords.
Yeah.
In a previous job, I was going through tickets and looking for similar scenarios and what's the test I can do on the system to say, hey, the system can blow up the same way. And I think I ended up with 9 points of Croft. I was able to look through all the systems and say, hey, here's our systems that are hitting all 9 points of Croft. Here's our systems that are only hitting 1 or 2 points of Croft.
I feel like it's, I've been involved in the last year in 2 projects to overhaul 2 separate services, a Splunk service on campus and the cPanel web service. And being the guy who was doing all the Puppet config management for that stuff and the documentation, neither of these systems were well documented, but had been on campus for 9 years. Neither of these systems were in config management in any real way. So it's very obvious to me working through it. It's very visible as I'm trying to satisfy all of those pieces, the docs and the config management. And now I'm in the position of trying to make my managers aware that all of the rest of our services that we're responsible for are in the similar state. And it's, so yeah, I'm trying to understand how, if someone had some like, so this is how I make these things visible to the management, that would be great. Because I'm struggling to get them to embrace the idea that like we're behind on this.
So your Puppet, what was your bus factor on?
Yeah, bus factor. If you don't want.
How many people need to be hit by a bus to make it unusable?
Yeah.
I mean, that's lottery.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Developer wants the lottery, they're gonna quit.
Right, yeah, and we don't have good documentation on how these things were built and maintained over 9 years. So you end up sitting on the machines trying to figure out what's important to move on, over.
I think the essence is hitting that, is being able to say, so what? If this goes down, so what? How many business processes are affected? How many customers are affected? How long is it going to take you to recover? And what's the expense going to be to recover? And what is
Sitting
the
down
effect
and
on your
having
brand?
that conversation.
Right. And you got to really put it in business terms. And you know what, you kind of hit the heart of why this talk came up. And maybe we didn't really hit it hard enough today, but this is, DevOps is not a if we do it or a nice to do it. This is an essential change businesses need to make if they want to survive. That's it. I mean, there's no surviving if you don't do this, but it's our job to be the shepherds and to help it cross that line, but we have to be willing to speak in terms that are going to resonate with our leaders and that are going to get you the money and get you the exposure and your resources. And it's a little bit uncomfortable and it's a big pain, but when we do it, it helps us prioritize our own work better. So when we take the time to say, so what, why does this matter? Or we make this risk visible, or we articulate the impact of tech debt on our ability to, grow the business, reach our customers, attract and retain the best talent. Nobody is coming out of college and wants to sit down and code in Fortran like I did. Nobody wants to do that. And if you have Fortran systems, when you want to articulate the impact of the tech debt, you say, you know what? The people who support this are all eligible to retire within the next 5 years. And no universities are teaching this. So we run the risk of this mission critical, business critical system having no one to support it. We need to, right? Those are the words you have to use. And it stinks because it's taking you away from, when you really get in the zone and you're solving a tech problem, you're in the zone. And you get lost in the elegance of that solution and you miss, right? Sometimes we gold plate things. But in 1990, I'm about 2 weeks late delivering some code that needed to get merged with some other code. And I'm really excited. And my boss, who'd been a Green Beret before he got into IT, comes up behind me and he's, Goyle, what the are you doing? And I look at him and I go, I'm coding for year 2000, Bob. And I was so proud of myself. He's like, knock it off. Your code's not still going to be around. And I didn't even know the tool actually that we were using actually had a year 2000 utility. And I'd taken 2 weeks, built this copybook. I'd gotten it into everybody's things. I tested it. We were all, and I was so proud of myself. But I didn't articulate it. I didn't know if that was the most important thing to do. I didn't even research the tools we already had. It turned out it was a non-issue. Right, but this is what happens. You know, we're like, I can solve this. The question is, should I? So, I mean, tech debt, we have to put it in terms of risk. We have to make a business, and it has to be related to how we're trying to grow the business.
And also, like, Google talks about toil. The Google SRE handbook talks about toil. How much of this kind of negative work effort that developers and project managers are doing every day and every week just in the maintenance of their product, that they could be spending more time doing other things.
Things that matter.
Right. How much time is wasted because we're not addressing this? Yeah.
So if you're doing a lot of, if you're not automating things and reducing your, that can be a form of tech debt too. Because if you can automate some of that stuff, you don't have to do that stuff.
Well, it's sort of like you've decided not to, I have decided not to implement this thing now because we need to make progress. That's tech debt.
Yeah.
If it creates an ongoing inefficiency that raises the cost of other things you're doing, and or it's going to blow up. I mean, I think.
And when it blows up, who's affected?
Yeah, what's the cost to remedy? What's the time?
Right, how long?
I mean, it bothers me, the whole tech debt thing bothers me, right? Because developers call everything tech debt when they didn't fully realize their great idea of how to implement something. And I mean, it's true. It's funny, but it's true that people just whitewash all manner of crap with tech debt. And managers are probably pretty accustomed to hearing about it.
Well,
so there's something that, risk, it's risk of outage, it's inefficiencies, it might be.
Right.
Or it might be, I don't like the way that guy named that code, and you just say, we'll fix it later.
And see, that concerns me, that attitude of we'll fix it later, because it seems like historically there's no later. So
until it blows up.
Yeah.
Well, not everything blows up. I mean, people have
so
a lot of these things are a matter of taste. They don't create an ongoing inefficiency.
Yeah.
They don't create a risk of outage.
That's not tech debt. That's just imperfect design or overcomplicated code.
Which could be okay if it's not the long pole in the tent.
Right.
If it's not a constraint, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I think technically it has to have a cost that you can, if you look at it, you can see that cost. And you can visualize it and demonstrate it.
Right, but some debt's okay. Some debt's acceptable. Some risks acceptable.
That's what I mean. You have to visualize it. You have to come up with a story about it that makes it an actual risk and not just something we can deal with.
Well, I think that's the challenge for those of us who are trying to advocate for DevOps and accelerate the adoption and not get tuned out and not get, oh, it's just an IT thing. It's when we can start to articulate, when we did this, we were able to, accelerate this product. It got to market faster. We were competitive, and you can watch.
So I think maybe one way to address your question about visibility and how to describe it, and I think of it as striving for real clear trade-off decisions, real clear and open trade-off decisions. So if you raise something, force a decision on it. Either we're going to fix it now or we're not. And make sure everybody knows what the decision was, how it was made, and move on. And the more that you can make those trade-off decisions happen.
That's a really good. You just reminded me of something. We had the client that's really advanced DevOps, and they're working in a really archaic legacy environment. What we ended up doing with their trade-offs, and I should have called them trade-offs, but we actually opened up a risks project in Jira, and so we made each assumption or risk or thing actionable. So we had to get are you comfortable with this trade-off, or we're making this decision so we can keep going? Because what we did, and then we, using some of the gadgets in Jira, we were able to build a dashboard so we could see the risk and the exposure and the decisions, and we could facilitate this conversation once a week with their client to say, this is what they've accepted. That is one way to make it visible. That actually keeping with DevOps and supporting Agile and moving on is capture these assumptions and these risks. And I'm going to keep working with this. There's some potential downside. Are you okay with that?
So I'd say that covers a lot, right? Because it is the things that the potential risk, it is the stuff that's not coded completely, right?
Or it's using technologies that are not go forward, which is really how the term was intended.
But we've conglomerated it into a whole bunch of stuff, right? And so, a couple of things that I have done is, when people stub their toe, right, is actually capture that. And if you can instrument monitoring, so maybe, the system falls over 75 times a day, but it auto corrects, but a user only hits it 5 times a day. They're like, well, it only happens 5 times a day. The user sees it. No, really, it's this massive problem, right? And so when you have actual numbers, what your numbers are, how many times does this thing actually happen? Where are we hitting that?
So degraded performance or outage or whatever, you're measuring that sort of thing, so you can give a number and say, this is a real issue.
Or how much time am I spending implementing a new feature because I have to work around this issue?
Well, yeah.
Or how many man hours are lost from the people using it.
Right. So I just want to weigh in on this with a completely different opinion than everyone else has spoken up. The most demoralizing, one of my employees right here. One of the most demoralizing things ever is 300, 400, 500 tickets in a backlog called tech debt. And secondly, your C-levels don't give a crap about your tech debt mostly because they're driving revenue. And if it's a choice between shipping a feature to keep the lights on or for you to sit there for a week and harden a system to your life's content, they're going to push the feature. Yeah. I mean, it's just like part of the game, right? And I was listening to ThoughtBot's Bike Shed today, and they were talking about how their opinion of tech debt is you either fix it then, or you're going to put it in a backlog and someone else is going to get it who has zero context on it, has no idea, has to spend a week figuring out exactly where you were because you had the exact context of what's going on. So I know back when a long time ago, I wanted to just sit there and fix all the travesties of every environment I've ever been in. But the name of the game, honestly, is you have to give up on that kind of and go forward because that's how you make money.
Well, we're giving up perfection. We're going for good enough.
Yep.
Okay. Give up or accept the risk. I guess it's accepting the risk. Hopefully it's an understanding that risk has been accepted, I guess. And that's
it's a really hard discussion to have with an engineer to say hey man, we have to ship this week and you can't automate every single part of it and everything like that. Happens all the time.
Yeah, and it comes back to, do you know what your value is to the business? And to also make certain your developers know their value to the business. And that their goal, therefore, is to create value for the business and not create their heart's desire perfect code. And the ugly truck idea plays here. There are a ton of ugly white vans with broken windows, with carpet sticking out the back, but their owners love them because they make money with them. It's not about having the prettiest van and the most perfectly functioning work truck. It's about,
as long as the vans aren't on fire.
well, but that's the risk. Some of these vans certainly have 300,000 miles on them, and they probably do break down from time to time. That's the risk that we want to bring to the business is, you know, this is an ugly truck. It makes money. It prints cash every day, but every now and then, unless we pay attention to it, it's going to break.
Wait,
That's
you know,
business.
you're making me think that if you are the owner of an ugly truck, you know, take care of it, get your oil changed. So if you guys are developers of tools and applications that are maybe on the back half of their life, you got to take more care of them. Don't just like log things as tech debt. And if they're never going to get fixed, don't log them at all, right? Handle as you accept this risk. It's
the one thing I'd add, I love that someone just said gave the odometer, how many miles are on the truck. That solidified it for me perfectly. And I think if there's a way, instead of saying, well, this is 2-point versions behind, or we could say, this is like your truck, and we've just added another 100,000 miles. We need an oil change, or we better buy a new car. So,
yeah, I mean, if it's important enough and it's such a big money maker, it seems like it would be important then to capture some of those deficiencies and start working on prioritizing their improvement. Because if it's that important, what's going to happen if there's so much technical debt built up and that service goes down? How long is it going to take to stand that up again? Or how long is it? Who knows how to stand it up completely? So, I mean, I get to some degree. I think there's definitely something to take away from the comment back there on plow forward. But if you just keep doing that, I think being campus is different certainly than being out in the real world trying to keep the lights on too.
Well,
so I get that to some degree. I get that.
And to the point back here, right? I think it is you kind of have to educate your business, right, and work in a partnership with them. You think about bringing the whole ball of wax together, and that is if you're following Agile, then actually having stories that can be done, right, and that don't have all these gaping holes in them. Here's a slice of this functionality that we can deliver, and then you don't have a lot of tech debt. And maybe we're going to make ugly trucks because they're dependable. We don't care, right? But then it's something that can be done, and it's scoped that you can actually fit it within your release.
right, because that's how we get started with Agile in the first place. These waterfall things, we were never going to get this stuff done. We were just going to move mounds of incompleteness into production and make it somebody else's problem. And I think you kind of hit the operative point, because that's what we're supposed to be. We are consolidating, collapsing the software, but in order to do that, we got to get better stories. They have to be clean. They have to be doable.
Right. And that's a partnership between business and development.
And some tech debt, or what I would consider what actually is tech debt, is something that would slow down a developer, right, from implementing a new thing that they need to do. And the other things that we might sometimes call tech debt are actually risks, you know, as far as, you know, high availability or disaster recovery kind of risks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it does make sense. These are just basics. What the piece I like here with the 7 steps, and I don't want to gloss over it because I know I want to be sensitive to time. I took my watch off because this Apple Watch is talking to you. I took mine off, but this model, the Know Your Numbers, says that every team needs to have an ops review, and it's monthly. Key, especially if you're on the ops side, you need to know your numbers, right? Let's go back to this thing, right? It depends what team you're on. You could be on a team that's in charge of building out new tools. You could be on, you know, project teams. You could be on ops teams. But whatever, you could be in charge of the whole thing. But whatever team you're on, whatever your bucket is, the idea is that every month have a check-in. You know, sometimes we do it painfully at home, and it's my husband and I sitting down with the calendar on who's doing what, who's covering volleyball, who's covering soccer, and you know, and then we do the same thing with finances, where we ahead or behind, we were above and below our budget. What adjustments do we need to make? And then we look at the household. What projects need to get done? What are we going to roll? I can let you know that I am using furniture that looked really awesome in 2003. Right? It's good enough. We've let it roll. It's not that comfortable. It's not comfortable at all. And at some point, it is going to become tech debt. That's got to be. But we do this. These aren't fun conversations. It's not my favorite part of being married is that monthly ops review, household. But it's the same thing. You got to have it. You got to know your numbers. I didn't like getting that know your numbers seen 3 years in a row. That I was a diabetic. I didn't like that, but I did it. I got the numbers. I took the actions, and I changed my life. I have a better, healthier life. I have a better, healthier marriage. When I've run teams, it amazes me what ops reviews have done. Bringing together people who never saw problems from someone else's perspective before. And now we sit here, we do this, we show how all of this is an ecosystem. How choices that I make about whether to make this fix or not, choices I make about whether to use standard tools or offer have a butterfly effect on other people. And when you have this monthly ops review, it could be a 15-minute meeting that you're all on the phone, or it could be you're going out to lunch, or it could be a Friday with beers. It's whatever makes sense for you. But it is, no matter what size team you're on, big or small, it is checking in with each other on some structured things that matter. I am recommending that, those are my questions. Are we working on the highest priority things? Do we have the right people working on the right things at the right time? What are our risks? How do we know? But when you take DevOps from a know your numbers perspective, it becomes more relevant to the business and you accelerate its adoption and impact. That's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, so we do ops reviews about every 3 weeks. So we go through a 3-month cycle, and every 3 weeks we do an ops review. And if things need to change or be updated, ops reviews also where we call out tech debt that may have been encountered, right? So all that stuff gets flagged. At the end of the dev cycle, we do a final ops review and then prep for the next PI planning meeting, which is where we tend to focus on how we're going to eliminate the tech debt that's been identified as a blocker for potential new products. It's where we also look at all the tools and processes that we use, and that's where we talk about implementing change.
Your ops review process sounds like at first people might feel like it's slowing you down, but it's one of those things that makes you move.
Absolutely.
It's like, who read the goal? Right? It's like dealing with Herbie and his backpack. That's what you've done right? You've taken...
it was a little odd when we started it a year ago, a little over a year ago, but now everybody gets it and it's important. They look forward to it, right? Because they call out things that they see. And we do micro ops reviews within individual groups, and then that expands out into our Bangalore office or our office in Austin or Seattle group or whoever. And then at the once a month, every 3 weeks, all of the directors from those groups get together and call out all the things people lower down have called out, right? So we have a big master overview of what's going on.
See, that's great because it rolls up. And that's the other thing about these numbers, that they have to roll up to the macro, and they have to help steer your business in the direction so that your business is always tuned into what the market wants. That's our job right now, because technology is driving all of our businesses. And if we are driving technology, then we have to be driving technology with a business focus. Let me see what else I've got. Oh, that was it. That was it.
For you. What was number 6 under 7?
Oh, number 6. Oh, engage all. That is use. Oh, I'm sorry, I did gloss right over that one. if you guys have Slack or internal message boards, no one's idea is better than anyone else's. Everyone has something to contribute. I'll give you another painful lesson. It was early in my project management years, and I just moved from being technical to project management, and my husband, who was only my boyfriend at the time, was eavesdropping on me, and I was so excited about this. I had this person doing that. We were doing the toughest project in the organization. It's flying. He goes, I'd never want to work for you. Sorry. I'm like, but everyone wants to work. He's like, listen, are you the only one on that call who went to college? And I said, no. He said, are you the only one getting paid? I said, no. He said, are you the only one who cares? I said, no. He said, why'd you make all the decisions? All those other people have valuable input, and you shut them down by telling them what to do. That was the most pivotal point in my career. It changed everything. I realized I didn't have all the answers, and that I would be a better leader and a better team member if I took the time to get to know other people and engage them in it. And then I became a really good project manager. But I was only a tyrant until that point. And you guys can be tyrants too with DevOps. Like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to automate this, or you talk super fast, like on the West Wing, really technical. But engaging all is really a really critical piece, because folks on your team have different perspectives and opinions and experiences, and engaging them will give you better outcomes at all times. So I know we're running really late. You guys, I would love to continue this conversation. I have the blogs, this is all going, there's a DevOps Starts with Know Your Numbers blog at daringsystems.com. I'd love if you came on and added some comments or feedback or anything. Because again, this is, I'm going to go present this at other organizations. I'd love to represent the triangle, right? And that people know these are good, original, and impactful ideas that are coming from this community. So I appreciate your feedback, and I'd love to stay engaged and LinkedIn and hear more from you.
Thanks.
So glad I went sleepless.
Do they turn off the AC?
They weren't usually the AC.
It does feel like not have like this. Yeah, I know. But not like have a lot more after that.